Hi, my name is Andrew Tremblay, and I play the cello, but I don't play it in the traditional way as in playing it with paper music. So here's my story from when I was born to the present day.
Yo, Andrew, why do your eyes wiggle?
And I tell them that I'm just visually impaired and that's the end of the conversation. So as you can probably tell, I don't go too in depth about it. So here are my family and friends to help me tell my story. First up, my mom and dad.
Hi, my name is Eric Tremblay. I'm Andrew's dad. This is Leanne, his mom. So, Leanne, why don't you take a few seconds and talk about Andrew's birth story and then how we learned about how he had nystagmus.
Andrew was a normal baby when he was born. There were no complications. When he was little, I remember taking him out to stores and things, and when we were waiting in line places, people would always say, "Oh, look at your baby, he's looking all over the place, checking everything out." And we were first time parents, so we didn't really think anything about that. We took Andrew to the pediatrician when he was 3 months old for just a regular well check, and the doctor was checking his eyes as part of the well check, and she said, "Oh, do you see how his eyes move back and forth all the time? That's a condition called nystagmus, and I really would like for you to take him to see a pediatric ophthalmologist." So it took a couple of months for us to be able to get him in to see that doctor, and of course we had never heard of nystagmus before, so we did what a lot of people do, and we searched it on the internet and found lots of concerning stories and things that as first time parents we were very worried about. But then when we took Andrew to see Dr. Frankel for the first time when he was 3 months old, he gave us a lot of great information and explained more about Andrew's condition and how it would affect him as he was growing up. So when Andrew was about 3 or so, we noticed that whenever he was watching a movie or watching TV, he would sit with his chin down on his chest and he would kind of look out like this, which we kind of were concerned about and was one of the things that we brought up on a visit to the eye doctor.
And that's where Dr. Frankel also talked about the concept of a null point, which is where someone with ocular cutaneous albinism and the problems that Andrew has with his eyes, that's where his vision is best and works most effective for him. And sometimes that's not in a physiologically normal position where that your head is up and you're looking forward at someone. Andrew's got some pictures that he can show later that show that his null point was off his brow and a little bit to the left, I think, is where he looked. And so that's what this surgery was for.
So after pointing that out to the doctor and looking at it, there are 2 different sets of muscles that hold your eye in the eye socket at a specific point, and Dr. Frankel felt like if he cut one of the 2 sets of muscles on Andrew's eyes, that perhaps that would allow him to lift his chin and have his head in a more typical position when viewing things straight ahead. So when Andrew was about 4, he had that surgery. So we went to Hershey Medical Center, Harrisburg Hospital, and had that surgery. And of course he was completely under anesthesia for that. And right after that, Andrew got his first pair of glasses. And I remember when he put his glasses on for the first time, he really kind of noticed a lot of things on the drive home from the eye doctor that he hadn't noticed before. And as part of the eye surgery, he had stitches in his eyes. We couldn't see them. They were up underneath his eyelids, but we had to give him antibiotic eye drops a couple times a day until his eyes healed. He didn't have to have bandages or anything. But I know that was very uncomfortable for him, and that was a tough time for him going through that surgery and that healing process. But it did correct the null point. It lifted his chin. It may not be as straightforward as somebody who doesn't have vision problems, but it's significantly better. Most people don't even notice if he drops his head a little bit. And then, of course, the glasses made a huge difference. And we went through some different types of glasses, sport glasses, tinted glasses, trying to find the best fit for Andrew. Because glasses that are close to his face that keep out a lot of extra glare and extra light tend to work the best. So since Andrew was 4, he's 16 now, so over those 12 years we've been kind of trying to perfect what the best eyeglasses are for him. And yeah, so that was the eye surgery time.
That's how I remember it as well. I do remember being home alone with him one time when he was very young. I think maybe you had already taken a part-time job again in the evenings, just to have some time outside the house. And I remember looking at him and noticing that his eyes were wiggling back and forth. But being a first-time parent, I didn't know that that was an indication of anything abnormal. I thought he was just learning to use his eyes.
And I think I remember too, his grandparents would say to us, "Oh, have you noticed that his eyes move back and forth a lot?" And just like you just said, I didn't really think of it because I didn't have a lot of baby experience. So I just thought he was learning how to focus his eyes and looking at things.
So Dr. Frankel was an excellent doctor. We went to see him once every 6 months for a while, and then shortly before his sister Abigail was born, Dr. Frankel gave us a definitive diagnosis of ocular cutaneous albinism. And of course we had no idea where that came from or what happened, and they sent us to a geneticist who gave us a questionnaire for a family history, and there were lots of flags that came up as carriers for albinism, such as very pale skin, premature graying, light eyes, or premature gray hair, light eyes, and things like that. And I think it became obvious at that point that Leanne and I were both carriers, and we just didn't know. And so I mentioned a moment ago that this happened shortly before his sister Abigail was born. And as Abigail was being born, I noticed that her hair was just snow white. And I almost made note of it as she was being born, but I caught myself so that I didn't worry you during the birthing process. I didn't want to throw that on you, but it was obvious to me as soon as she was born that she was albino as well. But it's been interesting, growing up with Andrew. He's always been a pretty good kid, but the albinism has generated lots of its own challenges. Andrew's very good on the cello, and part of being able to play music is being able to read it. And so one of the first things that we did for him whenever he was trying to learn to play the cello is we would simply take his music and enlarge it on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, turn it sideways, and just make it go from landscape, or from portrait to landscape, to get the extra width on the paper. And that worked for a while we were in the first part of Suzuki 1. And then when we got into Suzuki 2 and 3, the music was getting more and more difficult, and we had to go to an 11 by 17 piece of paper to get full songs on one sheet. And then we got to the point where it took multiple pages of 11 by 17 to do many of his songs for intermediate school. And at that point we realized we had to come up with some sort of other method to be able to get his music for him. And the Dallastown School District, since Andrew had an IEP, worked with us, and we put together a system where that he used a computer and basically what's kind of a fancy PDF reader to scan his documents in and make them show up on a computer screen that was not quite as big as 11 by 17, but allowed us to not have to have all those papers moving around on stage, because Andrew could change the page on the computer with a foot pedal. And this system worked out great for a while, until unbeknownst to us, he was growing up and getting bigger, and the laptop, we really didn't have a stand for it. It was just on a TV tray, basically, like the old-timey TV trays where you'd sit in front of the TV and eat your dinner or whatever. And that system, like I said, worked for a while, but then he was getting bigger, and what was happening was he was having to move farther and farther away from himself because his cello got bigger, and just things weren't able to be as close. And at that point, Dallastown reviewed what was going on, and we worked again, and we were able to get Andrew what's called an all-in-one, which is basically a giant tablet. And we went back to an 11 by 17 size screen, but more importantly, we were able to get the screen moved closer to him. And I remember the day that we got that computer, it was a cello lesson day. And I worked feverishly when I got home to install his PDF reader software on there and get it ready so we could take it to lesson. And we were able to get it right in front of him, and he started playing, and he played about 3 or 4 measures of music, and he said, "Oh my gosh, this is so much better." And that was kind of an amazing day, because there was a real jump in his playing ability because he was able to see the music better. We've now added one more piece to the system that we use to do Andrew's music, and that's a piece of scoring software which allows us to take the paper copies of Andrew's music, and I and his mother work together to recreate that music on a piece of scoring software. Now, the advantage that we have from that is that we're able to change the note sizes and the number of measures on a line,
and the spaces between
the spaces between the staffs, that allow Andrew to see the music much more clearly and more easily, but it still takes care of all the music notation so that we don't have to be very careful about where ties and things like that are, and courtesy clefs and courtesy key changes. So that system, while it's a lot of work, it's very important, and it's quite useful, and it's very valuable because it allows Andrew to play his music better.
And now we have a system, one stays at school, and we have one at home, and he transfers the files and songs back and forth with a little flash drive, where before he was carrying the computer back and forth to school, and that wasn't very safe for the machine. It wasn't very convenient for Andrew, so he's got the same setup at school and at home, which I think has also worked out really well.
So as you can probably tell, it's been a rough road for me. And I don't know how it is to live with someone with a vision disability, because I'm the only one in my family who has a vision disability. So here to share what that's like is my sister, Abby.
Hi, I'm Abby Tremblay. I'm Andrew's younger sister. I'm 13 years old, and I'm here to tell you about what it's like to live with Andrew. So whenever I was little, I always would get a lot of questions about why Andrew's eyes would wiggle side to side. I never really knew how to explain it to people until I got older and actually understood what was happening with Andrew's eyes. I got actually to the point when I was little that I thought that the movement of Andrew's eyes was completely normal, even with people who don't have nystagmus. And I actually never really noticed whenever I did start going to school that other people's eyes didn't move. It had always just kind of been a norm for me. I also remember when I was little, I would go with my mom or my dad and Andrew to school a couple days before the school year would start so that Andrew could find out where his classrooms were and where his locker was. And I always thought that those adventures through the middle school and high school were really fun because I got to be Andrew's little helper, helping him remember where all of his classes were. I've never really noticed Andrew struggle with reading anything or doing anything at home. I know that whenever he's older, he won't be able to drive, but that's never really affected how I see him as a person or how amazing of a brother he is. There'll be times, though, when we're out in the city that he won't be able to read a sign, and I'll have to tell him what it says, but that just seems completely normal to me now. I've just always really been amazed how he can work through his nystagmus in the brilliant way that he does, because he's still able to do things that require a lot of skill and talent and hard work from a person without any visual impairments, and he still manages to do it. And honestly, it blows my mind every day, and I admire him a lot for being able to work through his nystagmus and still be a happy, normal teenager. So I'm really proud of him, and I'm proud to say that I'm his younger sister.
So now we've gotten to the cello section of the video. Here is Mr. David Deal, the director of the Dallastown Orchestra and my private teacher. He's going to share what it's like to work with me and how far I've come since I've started playing cello. So when you first met me and experienced how I was playing cello, what did you think?
Well, I can remember when you were a third grader, and it doesn't seem so long ago, but it was a long time ago. I remember thinking to myself that it's going to be really hard for you to play the instrument because I think due to your disability, your physical body is always naturally tense or stressed or rigid. Because of your inability to see, you never know what's coming. So I think your body in general suffers from a great deal of tension. And I could feel that when you first decided to play the cello. I think it accelerated that issue. And I think a lot of what we have done with the development of your cello playing is just tried to focus on getting you to relax. Being able to vibrate on the cello is really difficult as is. But if there's constant source of tension, it slows the process. I think it slowed the process in your ability to shift and get around on the instrument. And it took many years to develop some relaxation techniques for you till you could get to the point where you physically weren't so tense. So I think fighting tension has always been a huge issue with your development as a player.
You've praised me in a sense in private lessons, and I never fully understood why. So could you explain that?
Well, I think anybody that is trying to do something that's very difficult, that a person with no disabilities has a difficult enough time trying to achieve, is praiseworthy. You did rise above your disability, and your playing exemplifies that. Now you're playing at the level of any other normal, average high school cello player, or maybe even a little above average. So you've come a long, long way with the disability. And I think a lot of that had to do with the development of the technology that the school district has provided for you to be able to physically see music on, and what you're doing with the music reader technology system that enables you to see music more clearly, I think has been a catalyst for you to develop as a much better player. Taking music to a copy machine and blowing it up really wasn't the answer. I think that the fact that the notes are backlit on a computer screen, I think helps you visually see what you're doing with a whole lot less effort than if we would have just taken music and blown it up on a paper.
In middle school, you experienced me playing with my laptop, even though it was for only a year and a half. What did you think of it then compared to now using the tablet system in high school?
I think the tablet system's better because it's just larger. And the fact that the tablet's larger, I think it's easier. One thing I'm totally grateful for, and I think one thing you should be totally grateful for, is the amount of effort that your parents put into the development of your cello playing. Your father uploading every last note of music with every fingering. He works tirelessly to create a library of music for you that's now all on your tablet. It's a great deal of work and effort. And from middle school on, I've been grateful for what he's done for you, because it was something that I didn't have to do. And if I would have to have done it as a teacher, I think it would have been really time consuming for me. So, I mean, I think we owe your dad, both of us owe your dad, a great deal of gratitude for the amount of effort that he's put into your music education as a cello player.
Are there any final comments that you would like to give?
I'd have to say that when we started this process, when you were in third grade, I would have never thought that you would have gotten this far. And I think the biggest surprise and joy for me is to see the level of accomplishment that you've achieved. Getting into the York Youth Symphony means that you're in the top, 10 or 12 players in the county, and you achieved that goal. And how impressive is that, with the visual disability that you're suffering with? Like I said, I think playing a string instrument is a very challenging and daunting prospect. And doing it with a disability, I think, would make it much more difficult. But I think through technology and your support that you have at home, I think it's amazing what you've achieved. And congratulations to you. And I think music is going to be a part of Andrew Trembley's life forever. And if that's the case, I think I've achieved my goal.
So there you have it. That's what it's like to live and work with me. Next, I'm going to play a song for you that most people know. So now that you've met my family and friends, and they've told you what it's like to live with me, work with me, and what I've gone through, I'm going to play it for you. That's my story and how I can play the cello to accommodate my disability. Thank you for watching.